Welcome to episode 205 of the Brainy Business, understanding the psychology of why people buy. In today's episode, I'm so excited to introduce you to Emily Cadiz, founder and CEO of Finnegan the Dragon. Ready? Let's get started.
You are listening to the Brainy Business Podcast, where we dig into the psychology of why people buy and help you incorporate behavioral economics into your business, making it more brain-friendly. Now here's your host, Melina Palmer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melina Palmer, and I want to welcome you to the Brainy Business Podcast. Today, I am very excited to introduce you to Emily Cadiz, founder and CEO of Finnegan the Dragon. What is Finnegan the Dragon, you ask? Of course, Emily will tell you all about that during our conversation, but here's the short teaser version. Finnegan the Dragon is a new company I've had the honor of being an advisor for. This is an organization that is all about improving brain development and language learning for kids using inclusive music, which, if you know me at all, you know I am all about. When I was given the opportunity to be part of the advisory team for this company, I knew it was something I had to do. There are so many amazing things on the horizon for Finnegan the Dragon, and I am beyond excited to finally be able to share what Emily and her team are up to so you can learn all about it. A bit of housekeeping before we get started. There are lots of important links, including some to past episodes, and to get your free ebook from Finnegan the Dragon, which launched this week, and you're going to hear all about in our conversation, and so much more within the show notes for the episode, which are waiting for you within the app you're listening to or at thebrainybusiness.com/205. Those already on the Brainy Business list got a direct link from me in the email you receive every Friday. Not on the list yet? Simply sign up for any freebie at thebrainybusiness.com and you'll be automatically added. The freebie for this episode is the first chapter of my award-winning book, What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You. And if you already have the book, in which case, thank you, you'll also be automatically added to the list when you get your copy of the free PDF companion workbook. Both are housed in our free behavioral economics community called the Be Thoughtful Revolution. There's a link to join that global community in those show notes as well. Now let's jump right in. Emily Cadiz, welcome to the Brainy Business Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Melina Palmer.
Yeah, yes. I'm so happy that you're here. And for the audience, perhaps you will be able to tell in this conversation, as I alluded to in the intro, Emily and I know each other very well by this point, have talked many times since we got connected. Believe it or not, Emily, it was 6 months ago, I think, that we first started talking. It was only like 6 months ago, and we've talked so much since then. And to give some insight into you and the amazing work that you're doing, I would love if you could introduce yourself and I guess some of how we got acquainted, and I can fill in blanks if need be.
Yes, my name is Emily Cadiz, and I'm the founder and CEO of Finnegan the Dragon. It's a company that focuses on music-based curriculum and gamification online for the pre-K population to support language development and literacy development. We as educators know that there's this gigantic trend of plummeting language and literacy scores across the nation, part of it having to do with the pandemic and part of it having to do with this shift in how we raise children right now. That is my company in a nutshell. How we got introduced, go back 6 months. I think it was definitely through our mutual colleague, Chris, who met you at a fundraiser, I believe.
It's actually, so it's the friend of a friend, right? It was that he knew someone who then recommended me, and I got acquainted to Chris, who, connected their whole deal.
Yeah. Roundabout. And as soon as I connected with you, you were like, no, I get it. I used to do music. I loved it. And I was like, what? Okay, let's talk. And that was it. And then it just started. And a lot of what you told me 6 months ago, it took a little while for it to sink in because I've never run a business before. I've always been a service provider, a public servant, and a musician. So my learning curve into the world of entrepreneurship has been steep. And you have been, I would say, just a necessity for me.
Well, that's always nice to hear. I appreciate that.
Just incredibly helpful. I can't even believe how blessed I am sometimes when I look around at the people that I have been able to work with this past year, and you're one of them, and it's been amazing. So,
well, thank you. And I love everything about Finnegan and what's happening with Finnegan the Dragon. It's a really exciting project. If you can share, like you said, a little bit about, you've been a teacher with a background in music. And so how did, really what is Finnegan? You talked about how it's, helping with language development. It's definitely about young brains developing properly, which is why I, of course, got excited, everything Brainy, and helping our, little ones to be able to have better brain development. But how did you realize, can you tell, a little bit about how you realized this gap existed and, the journey that you went on after your accident?
Yeah, that was not a fun time in life. I did suffer a fairly large traumatic brain injury in the classroom. And this really turned my whole world upside down. Going from serving the disabled population to becoming disabled was humbling, to say the least. And during my time of recovery, previous to being an educator, I had actually been a musician in New York. I studied music. I was a performer. I had children, got married, became a special educator. This injury was clearly not a planned part of life, but during my recovery, I found myself really going back to music, and not so much going back to music to memorize words or routines or things, but just singing to help my brain strengthen itself again. So much so that I ended up going down to our local university, Portland State University, and saying, hey, I don't know what's going on with this connection, but I need to study this. Would you guys mind letting me study this very odd connection between song and my own brain right now? And they were kind enough to go, sure. We can't really help you out, but yes, try it, go for it. And so I did. And I started going down this path of going, what is the connection between my own brain recovering through sound and music and this larger body of work that I found that was out there? And so as I was researching, I found a lot of universities overseas were starting to make these connections between music and language development, or I should say music and reacquiring language, or music and acquiring language for the first time, and just how music makes brains stronger in general, but not in the trained musicianship way, just in like a tonal, like a very basic tonal way. And as I, dug through piles and piles of papers and research, I kind of stumbled upon what people are calling inclusive music, which is how do we use music to really strengthen the brain at multiple times throughout our lives to either cope or acquire or realign ourselves with language. And not in some weird additive way, but really inclusively from the ground up. How do we make music function for ourselves that way? And I had to test it on myself at first, which was, it's weird. Conversations with myself. But it was also exceptionally powerful to have that conversation with yourself, to go, okay, I was able to do this before. Can I do this again? If I continue going down this path, can I remember how to do this sequence of events? Will I be able to strengthen my brain to the point that I cannot have a panic attack, or maybe at least reduce the number of panic attacks? Or can I remember how to, it's, when I first started, just make sure that all of my clothes were on the right way, make sure my pants were fully zipped up and my shirt was buttoned, because you would forget steps or you would forget words, or I would forget words, I should say. And all of that seemed to come back to a point of like medical stability over time. But going to the traditional therapies never really helped, because it was a solid reminder to me that I was disabled. And it was really harsh to see that. I had always assumed that my students and the people that I served were benefiting from the quote therapies, right? I never quite understood that oftentimes medical interventions can really just serve as a constant and steady reminder that you are different and that your access point to the world is not the same as everyone else's. So I became really passionate about inclusivity at that point, going, well, there is no reason for much of what we do to not be inclusive. It really doesn't need to be additive. It just takes better planning from the ground up.
Yeah. And by that, what I hear and what you're saying is that the lessons of what can be helping those who are, like you said, disabled, or for what other differently abled, whatever language there, the ways that music and tonal properties and things can help them with language development, and knowing it's other disciplines as well. But it's not just something that has to be for that population, but instead could say everyone can benefit from this. And so if we make it part of the entire curriculum from a very young age, everyone can benefit. And so you don't have to make anyone feel different and be reminded or told that they need something different when that might not be the case, but you can make it so it's just better for everyone.
Yeah, well, especially when you have little ones, we don't want to segment out anything. We want everyone to access the best quality education possible at that age, because everyone is struggling with a little bit of something. It's just part and parcel of developing from birth to 6. And developmental stages happen at different rates for different children. And we want to make things that are as accessible for everyone. We want everyone to be able to access music making. We want everyone to access language, everyone to access literacy at some level, whatever their level is. So if we can start making products, in this case, my product, that widens that path a bit and gives more access. That's the whole point of inclusivity, is just to widen the path of access for me.
Yeah, for sure. So, and just out of curiosity, were you saying you were like teaching yourself along the way, and even the example of, like you said, getting dressed or something, right? So yeah. were you making up songs to help remind you of the steps to happen there? Or was it, can you share a little bit about the insights you learned or things that you tested and found through your research of what helped you to be having some of that memory or processing? Can you give a little, knowing we've got a brainy audience here, what sort of insights?
Well, I had heard the term sweating your brain or brain sweat. Have you heard that before, when you're, brain sweat?
Yeah.
If you ever want to sweat your brain, go sit through like a college level music theory class.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah. Your brain will sweat. And I remember telling someone, my brain really just hurts. And this woman laughed. And I said, no, it really does. Like, I hadn't told anyone that I had this brain injury, but I was like, no, it really hurts. It just kind of fatigued. My brain was fatigued. And the process of really making my brain tired and then letting it repair was the process that music had. It wasn't necessarily like making up little songs to go about my day. It really wasn't. It was about practicing creating that sound and really having to focus on creating that sound in a sequence. So, when you talk about singing classical music, you're talking about all of these little tiny muscles that you have to really be aware of, and the language and all of the way in which you hold your tongue and the way in which you hold your your jaw. And so that focus of creating tone like that, it was less about the higher art form for me and more about just like the physicality of it. That was where my brain was sweating, and it was sweating in a really good way. So by the time I got done with having to put on those recitals, which I'm sweating actually talking about them right now. There is nothing more humbling than being like a 41-year-old woman amongst like 20-year-old zest-filled, youngins singing classical music. That is also humbling.
Yeah. Yes. In the like similar story so I've told multiple times, on the show or when I've done interviews and like that when I was young, as far as what are you going to be when you grow up, it was like, I'm going to be a singer, no question. That was what I was going to do. And I, was filling out applications for Juilliard and whatever. And I remember though taking a class. And so I had been a vocalist for a long time, sang opera and everything, and had done sight singing, but I didn't play an instrument. And I just really wish I could. I have this great dream of accompanying myself and know that I am just not skilled in that way. And, but I was taking 2 classes at one time when I was doing a program Running Start, which while I'm in high school, I was able to take college classes in a good program. And so I was taking this instead of going to high school, I was going to the college campus and kind of doing both. And I remember I took 2 electives at once. And so one was sight singing and the other was whatever the reverse, right? So it was that you would be hearing something and then you're supposed to be writing the composition like as it's playing to hear it and write it, right?
Yep.
And nope, like there's no... There's no version of me that can do that at all. Right. And so it was very clear I was going to fail this class. And where I was realizing that, that really became a catalyst to me of like, I can always sing with a different degree, but like, do I want to endure 4+ years of this just excruciating work, which is important and like bow down to everyone that can do that, but being able to like visualize when I'm hearing, and it was not like do, re, mi, right? This was like 16th notes and mixed chords. And I was like, there's not a version of the world where that's going to work out.
Those are the classes that I took. And I kept doing it voluntarily for 4 years because I had to go back and do a post-bac. I had to go back and do 2 years of post-bac work to get all that stuff. I had already taken some of the classes, but it had been so long. And with the traumatic brain injury, it's like Swiss cheese, man. I couldn't remember like, what are you talking about? So for 2 years, I had to do all of the undergrad. And then I did 2 years of a master's. And let me just tell you, for 4 years, I think many people in my world thought I was nuts and insane for doing this. And I just kept going. I'm like, no, there's something there. This is like, I'm not going to stop. There is something there. There is something big there too. It's not just a little something. It's a big something. But I cried. My first sight, they call it sight singing and ear training because you're training your ear to hear the pitches and be able to dictate it out. And the sight singing is you just give that piece of music to yourself and you just do it. I cried.
I bet. Yeah, I think I did too.
In front of Hannah Penn. And her daughter ended up being the voice of our dragon, which was awesome.
Oh,
I know, right? But I cried in front of her. I was like, okay, just give me a moment, just a second. And I'm like weeping through this like 4 bars of like, da, 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 da. She's like, okay, you've passed. You can go now.
Oh, well, it's nice how these relationships end up forming, right? Kind of a interesting way that comes together. So like you said, you knew that you were onto something big. Can you share, just some of the insights of what you found and how that has evolved into this amazing world of Finnegan the Dragon?
Yeah. One of the big things was from ear training and sight singing. I remember someone came in with I think it was a Radio Lab podcast on tonal-based languages. And they talked about the 1.5 billion people that speak tonal-based languages, Thai, Mandarin, version of Chinese, Vietnamese, and how those pitch accents for different words within these languages created basically brains that outperform in all cognitive areas. They outperform brains of non-tonal based languages. We have a non-tonal based language. So one of the, I always get these mixed up, the lagging and the leading. The lagging one comes after, right? So this would be a lagging indicator, saying that perfect pitch is 60 to 80%. It's a common of 60 to 80% for populations that started studying music between the ages of 4 and 5 for tonal-based languages. But really for our language, we're like down 7 to 15. It's, but that indicator just shows that the brains are just being beefed up with tone. And there's really no other way to explain it. But we can see that in a lot of countries where tonal-based languages are dominant, or even with people who are studying tonal-based languages separate from their own, their brains cognitively are being able to do things that other brains aren't.
Right.
We also see it just in individuals who are studying what we would call trained musicianship from a very early age. We can see vocabulary skills and mathematical skills, science, all of that is really just more developed at an earlier age. So Finnegan the Dragon came out of this idea that, well, gosh, what's going on with our kids where we're seeing these language rates really going down? I mean, not just literacy rates, but language rates. To the point where the CDC just lowered the language rates for the first time in 20 some years, saying, we're not creating these standards. This is just happening across the nation. What's going on?
Right. So I think that's important. Can you share a little bit more about some of those statistics, some of the specific things that you've been seeing? And,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're not hidden anymore. Now they're coming out. Before, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, these were internal statistics to, if you were working with this population and, in this industry, you would see these things, right? Now it's become very clear that we have literally a pandemic upon a pandemic. It's pretty bad.
Right. So that's where there were expectations on what children, as they're growing, like words that they would know, standards for what they can be doing.
We call them just developmental milestones. Can you hit the developmental milestones of a certain number of words? And the quality of words, both expressive and receptive. Can you understand it and show me an understanding? Can you say it and express those words? Those standards have gone down.
Yes. And to meet the ability to hit what was considered standard has gone away to a point where the CDC has said what was standard. So like when we were kids, what we were expected to know, and even our children who went through 5-10 years ago, that is no longer the standard. It is expected that the children that are in kindergarten and wherever else know less than the kindergartners before them, at least here in the United States.
Yes, that is an accurate statement. It is also accurate to say that we have around 34% of kindergartners needing special education interventions coming into the 22-23 school year. We can also say that if your child is spending more than 30 minutes in front of a screen per day with passive engagement, that their chances of having ADHD or a mood disorder are increased by 50%. These are heavy, heavy things that are being given by authoritative bodies of knowledge, American Association of Pediatrics, the CDC. These are not little articles being written by some, small academic body here and there. And the big piece that is contributing to this is passive screen time. Sitting in front of a screen for children now under the age of 6, about 4.5 hours a day, which is about 1,500 hours a month, which is about 2.5 months of their year. And that's just, not awake time. Awake time, it's about 4 months. 4 months of your child's year is spent in front of a screen we can't expect children to sit in front of screens that much and not affect the brain. And we are affecting the brain.
Right.
Collectively. We're making choices to do this. And it's happening at a time in life between birth and 6 when brain development is critical. This is where we learn all of our functional communication skills. This is when we learn really everything we need to know throughout our entire life. And if we are not taking some very careful steps right now, we're going to be setting ourselves up for some pretty devastating situations later on. We're already seeing it.
Right.
So passive screen time is the root cause of a lot of this.
And so you know, and we've talked about this, of course, that so we know that screen time itself is not going away. So in an ideal world, we wouldn't have the access to the screens and kids wouldn't be using them for brain development purposes, right? That you just wouldn't even have that as something that's part of their space. That's never going to happen. And really, you know, screens are valuable in other ways. And so in that way, you know, the word passive is very important and what built out when creating Finnegan the Dragon. So can you talk a little bit about what is considered passive? What are some of the things that maybe obviously don't have to name names. You can if you feel comfortable doing so, but of other products that claim they're help or may seem like they are helping with cognitive development, but are not actually doing what they are claiming to do and could maybe contributing to a problem that they're intending to solve. And, you know, like where does Finnegan come in on that?
Sure. You know, and I would never try to bash on any product that's out there. Everyone is attempting to help with this large issue. I mean, everyone is trying their best. Passive screen time in general is that silent participation with the screen. So it's either that lean back moment that a child has when they're watching something, especially like fast cut animations with music that's really at a faster tempo. They're not going to participate with it. They're going to lean back and watch it. So that lean back moment is the passive. But even a partial lean forward and touching of the screen is passive because it's using your finger isn't necessarily activating the parts of your brain needed for full engagement with learning. So when you walk into a classroom, well, when I, you know, after teaching for 20 years, if I walked into a preschool classroom or kindergarten classroom and it was dead silent, I would be very concerned. I would be very concerned. That would be my first indicator that something was wrong in the classroom. Classrooms are noisy at that level, or they just are. And not in like a super loud way, but there's just a hum and a buzz of activity because that is the sound of learning. There needs to be sound and noise and singing and motion and movement going on for little ones to really understand how their world works. When you see children slack-jawed quietly in front of a screen or a device that was intended for them to lean back and be quiet, that is when my concern level goes up. I don't mind if they have, well, I should say I don't mind. It's not my child. I stayed home with my kids when they were under the age of 5. My gosh, you know, did I use screens? Yes. I needed to be able to do things like, you know, I don't know, go to the bathroom by myself. Like, please just leave me alone for 5 minutes. I love my children very much. One of them's graduating from college this year. Thank you. Yeah. But it was a matter of just, you know, it's survival as a parent. You're going to use these devices. They were not intended for toddlers. They were not created for toddlers. They were not created for your 3 and your 4 and your 5 and your 6-year-old. They were not made to encourage brain development at this age. So we have to deal with a device that was not intended for them. And we have to figure out how to make that device work for them in a way that's not going to harm them. We're not even talking about making, you know, growth. We're just saying, let's just not harm at this point. What can we do to eliminate sources of harm? And so the product that we've created is really about using your voice to interact with the screen. How can you use your voice and and getting visual feedback from your voice to practice language with automaticity, that expressive language that you use when you sing? You're going to be singing in patterns that have beat and meter, that are going to have rhyme built in. So you have these anticipation marks of where words come in on the song. So songs are perfect for that. Games are great because they provide kids with challenges. They have to make choices. There's adventure. There is positive reinforcement and leveling up. So you can get kids to sing more and more and more and practice those skills more regularly. Now, we also know that this age, it's very difficult to take learning off the screen and generalize it. So Finnegan the Dragon isn't just a game. It's also a classroom curriculum dedicated to bridge that learning that you would do with sound and language at that level to the screen. So it goes back and forth. So if you're teaching in your classroom, maybe sounds like P's, B's, and M's, all your bilabial sounds that are the first things babies say, the baba, mama, papa. And you're doing songs online that are going to strengthen the mouth with P's, B's, papa, baba, mama. But you're doing it in this way where children may not understand that they're actually learning or practicing that sound and connecting it to that letter. It becomes less of like, hey, this is like your math time online, or this is your reading time online. And it just becomes this game where it's all inclusive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And can you share a little bit about R's? So we've talked about like the problem with R, right? And so just even thinking as a parent, so I have at the time of this conversation, my son is 9 months old. So like very much in the mamas and dadas, right? But, even thinking as, with the older ones is thinking through words and trying to sing songs and focus on things. You telling me about the problem, the trouble with R is fascinating. And I know you're full of all these sorts of insights that are useful tidbits for people to know as they're trying to teach things to their children, and know that there's a wrong time to focus on the letter R, which who would even know, right?
Let them sound like little Elmer Fuds. Please leave them alone. Do not touch it. I mean, we're not going to eliminate row, row, row your boat, but please don't correct your R's and eliminate words like, for instance, we use row, row, row your boat in the initial game and in our initial game. And we had to change the word merrily, because merrily, unless you are an 18th century family, that is, you're not going to use that word. It's ridiculous. Right. It's also a tongue twister for an adult to say 3 times in a row. I can't even say that, let alone a 3-year-old. So let's get rid of that and bring in some concrete vocabulary like rowing fast and rowing slow. Now, rowing is an action. It's an easy thing to model for kids. They can pretend to be doing it. Maybe they don't have a boat in their backyard. Maybe they've never actually rowed a boat, but they can pretend to row. So keep the word in there. Just don't correct them. What you can actually do is reinforce a sound that will have to be undone later, or maybe it will never be undone. That is part of what we do with inclusive music. I work with a speech language pathologist and an occupational therapist to make sure the music hits those developmental milestones and that we aren't really encouraging inappropriate sounds at inappropriate ages. We're trying to strengthen the mouth and strengthen the brain and strengthen the vocabulary of kids. But we also need to educate parents in that, it may be concerning that your child, even at first grade, isn't saying their R's. Enjoy it.
It's adorable. Just let it be.
It's adorable, and it's going to go away. And I still remember this one kid with a little tiny lisp coming up to me. He was in the first grade. I could have him talk to me all day. I still remember that. Well, he came to my door at Halloween with his child.
Aww.
Just FYI, that's how old I am. And he does not have a lisp, by the way. Right. But I remember him having the lisp, and it was so cute. Oh my gosh.
Oh, adorable.
And I'm that old.
Let's see, it's experience, right? So just to show how long you've been in the classroom and then going back to school after, like you said, you had this very unexpected and unplanned traumatic brain injury, relearning to then come back around and create Finnegan the Dragon, which you've been doing for how many years in the making, knowing it's, a lifetime, but like really working on Finnegan the Dragon, how many years would you say it is as we're coming up to the game being launched here very soon?
I would say the research behind it and really the true efficacy of using music as a vehicle for everything beyond the ABCs took about 4 years of true research, really digging in. Most of the stuff was being done overseas in Finland and then also in New Zealand. And then at the end of the time that I was studying this overlap between music and language development, Johns Hopkins had picked up on it, Rice University, Stanford, they were all starting to do their own studies on, well, what is this big connection that we're seeing here? And it's a big connection because if a child by the time they're in kindergarten can't differentiate between high tones and low tones, there's a whole slew of stuff that they might be at risk for. And they're finding that it's a really strong indicator of brain development to say, hey, tone without musicianship, just tone is equally important at this age to, all of your academic subjects, math, reading, all of it. In fact, it's probably more because when you're born, there are theories that say you're born with perfect pitch. Really, you think at the end of the day that you're born with an inability to sing and that it grows over time, right? The reality is your brain is kind of born as this very beautiful sponge that can take in all sorts of stuff, but tone and language actually develop at the same rate. And if we ignore tone, going back to those tonal-based languages, we're just not really strengthening the brain as much as we would like it to be. So this is not trained musicianship. We're not training your child to be
an opera singer or something, right?
No, N-O, N to the O. This is a basic human right. We're built with this device in us. Mm-hmm. I mean, it really is. It's like having two hands and deciding only to use one of them.
Right. Yeah.
We need to use the other part of our brain. We need to be using tone as a vehicle because how did you learn the ABCs?
Yeah, the song, right? As with
you
all
sang
of
it.
This. Right. Yep.
You sang it.
I remember when I was in elementary school and we had to know the preamble of which we watched School of Rock or no. What is that? Schoolhouse Rock? Was that what the thing is? Right. So the We the People in order to form a more perfect union. Right. And so you have to be able to recite it and that you have to do the whole thing from memory. And I remember, my teacher saying to everybody, like, and if you have to sing it to be able to say it, you can, because we had We the People in order to form a more perfect union. Right? And I still remember it. That was from 5th grade. Right. And I'll have to go back and do the whole thing, but we watched it over and over and over again, but it hits. And even where you hear that song that like a song that's your like blast from the past and every word and all of what it is and just a few notes and what's coming.
Ice baby.
Yes. Or Under Pressure, if that's what you prefer to go take it back a level. So I love music and I have always said, if I was to get involved with another like nonprofit or something. So I've volunteered with organizations in the past, but music in schools and development, I find is like so important to me as something and seeing that it gets taken out of school. And I think that's such a huge problem for the brain and development. Like I said, math and just have felt this way from, and discipline and thoughtfulness and slowing down. There's so much value that comes from vocals, and for me singing with choirs and being part of a team and all of that, similar to what you get from some sports, but knowing there's something else there that really is important. And so when the opportunity to work with you and Finnegan the Dragon came up, I was just, of course, delighted and love chatting with and spending time with you. So before we close out, of course, need to talk about what's on the horizon. So this week, we are actually having this episode coming out intentionally on the week that you have something coming out from Finnegan in a series of stuff in the coming months. And I know I have advised you to keep content evergreen and most of this is evergreen, and we should talk about these amazing things that are coming, and they will be available for years to come. So what's happening now? What's happening in the near future for Finnegan?
Well, right now we are introducing our main character, Finnegan, and his backstory through our ebook. And we're just giving it away to everyone online. We want everyone to read a little bit about him and see why this little dragon would use music to help him overcome some things that he's facing. And I don't like to use the word overcome, but in this case, it might be the most appropriate. But that's what we have right now. And we're giving that away throughout the summer for free. We want everyone to be able to access it. It's a great story to download, especially if you have a little one going to kindergarten for the first time in the fall. It's a great story to be able to read and talk about some of those challenges that they may be facing, some of those feelings they might be feeling. We're also doing our summer song series, and we're giving away a free download of one of our songs every week throughout the summer so that you can sing along with Finnegan, get to know his voice, also participate in some activities that we're going to be giving away as well. But most of it is song-based, literacy-based. So please go to our website, download the book, sign up for our newsletter, and we'll be sending those out to you on a weekly basis so that you can have something to do with your kiddo over the summer.
Yes, 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 definitely. I know summer is upon us, and I know that Finnegan the Dragon is also focusing on Instagram. So to be going, so just search Finnegan, Finnegan, the Dragon on Instagram. And there will, of course, be links in the show notes so everyone can go get their free ebook and learn more. And even if you don't have little ones, you potentially know someone with little ones. So if you can share, it's so important to be helping our generations of little learners to be able to have a fighting chance, as we're looking forward, where we're getting into a global economy and we're going to be competing against others that do have these tonal based languages, and wanting to help all the children be on a level playing field. I feel like my new momness as I'm getting a little bit teary as I'm talking about it. I'm still have that, right? But for the Brainy baby, for Hudson, I care about him being able to learn, and to all the children out there, and those who, I know there are listeners from all around the world. So those of you who have children that are learning in tonal based languages, amazing. And Finnegan can be helpful in that space as well. So please do stay involved. The game is coming soon-ish, right? As very soon in the time frame of things, but it's beta's coming in the fall.
Yes, it's coming in the fall. We're excited to introduce that. We're excited to be able to build it in some adventure pieces so that children are not just working on their language skills, but also their decision-making skills and their ability to problem solve. All of those things are really important at that age to make choices, and it's going to be fun. But getting to know Finnegan and why he sings is the first step. So please download that book.
Wonderful. And I, as a very proud advisor for Finnegan the Dragon, I'm so thankful to be involved with this organization. I know that amazing things are going to be coming from Finnegan and all of his friends over the coming years. And for everyone who's listening, if you know of research that's interesting that you think Emily or I or the team would find valuable, if you're looking to do some additional research, if you teach in a classroom and you want to be, beta on the curriculum in your class for pre-K, if you have kids that are interested, if you're at a company that wants to invest, all the things.
All the things.
It's a really cool time to be involved with the project. So definitely you can send me an email, melina@thebrainybusiness.com. And you can also, of course, Emily, what's the best way for people to reach out to you directly for that?
Emily@Finnegan.com.
Wonderful, wonderful. So excited about all the cool things out there, and for everyone to get their ebook and to see more from Finnegan the Dragon. And again, thank you so much, Emily, for joining me on the show today to finally talk about Finnegan. I'm so excited.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I so appreciate this.
Of course. Wonderful. And so, thanks again, everybody. Have a wonderful music-filled day. Thank you again to Emily Cadiz for joining me on the show today. What got your brain buzzing, or perhaps today I should say humming or singing, in today's conversation? To me, there are so many things I love about Finnegan the Dragon. As I said, I've had the honor of being an advisor for the company for about half a year now. And so I know so much about fantastic Finnegan and his friends. As mentioned in the episode, with my background in music and love of the brain, being able to help young children to have stronger brain development through fun and music, how could I not be excited about this? As Emily said, the ebook came out this week and is available to download for free. If you have little kids of your own, please download it and share it with them. If you know someone with pre-K kiddos or a teacher for that age group, please share it with them to introduce their littles to Finnegan. We're just launching this exciting company to the world now, and there's going to be so much cool stuff happening. But right now, I do have a favor to ask. If you know of anywhere that Emily should be connecting to spread the word about this amazing company and what it is going to be doing for children around the world, can you send an email to let us know? This could be a podcast, a magazine outlet, local news, anything. We want to make sure as many people as possible know about the importance of this company so it can help as many kids as possible to have the best possible brain development. Go ahead and email me, melina@thebrainybusiness.com, and I can connect you to Emily, get those conversations started. Thank you so much in advance for your time, for following Finnegan, for sharing it, for giving those ideas of where Emily can be doing interviews, and just any general support that you provide. Very much appreciated. And I know that there are going to be really great, amazing things on the horizon for Finnegan the Dragon. As a quick reminder before we close out the show, the notes for the episode with links to get your free ebook, learn more about Finnegan the Dragon, including being on the list to be a beta tester for when the app launches soon, are all waiting for you at thebrainybusiness.com/205. I hope you've enjoyed learning about Finnegan and these fascinating insights about little brains as much as I have. Let us know on Instagram, where you can find me as the Brainy Biz, and of course, at Finnegan the Dragon as well. And if you enjoy the experience I've provided here for you, will you share about it? That could mean leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever else you listen, sharing this episode or any other with a friend who you think would find value in the insights, or even hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already. Thank you so much in advance. I appreciate it. And you. Thank you again to Emily Cadiz, founder and CEO of Finnegan the Dragon, for joining me on the show today. It was a delight to chat with and learn from you. Next week, join me for another Brainy episode of the Brainy Business Podcast. It's going to be a lot of fun. You won't want to miss it. Until then, thanks again for listening and learning with me. And remember to be thoughtful.
Thank you for listening to the Brainy Business Podcast. Melina offers virtual strategy sessions, workshops, and other services to help businesses be more brain-friendly. For more free resources, visit thebrainybusiness.com.